This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. And today, as my special guest, you guys have been asking for him for a long time. We finally tracked him down. Former WWE and WCW superstar Max Payne, who was also known as Man Mountain Rock. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm just fantastic. It's been a great weekend.
Yeah, you've been doing autographs and all sorts of stuff this weekend, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's been my first time in almost 30 years of being back in the business at all. And so I was not prepared for how much fun I was going to have and how much I'd like it. So it was this exceptionally bright spot, if you will.
What made you distance yourself from the business for so long? The last time I heard anything about you, you had turned vegetarian and you were doing something with that. But prior to that, it had been like a long time before I heard anything.
Oh, that's a loaded question because initially I left because I was hot at the business. I was done. But then the truth of that is really not just that simple. It's much more complex than that. My life was going the wrong direction, and I knew if I didn't leave the business and really leave the business and get away from it, I was I was going to end up dead. And so I stepped away just because I knew, and I wanted to watch my kids graduate from high school. I had a lot of stuff I wanted to do in my life, and the business I'd really had about as devastating of a blow as I could have in the business. Some things went really south, and I just said, "Fuck it, I'm done." And so that's where that's when I said I'm leaving, and I left with prejudice and just made sure I wasn't accessible because first of all, I didn't think it's funny, you think that people just don't want you around and the wrestling, this part of doing this fan. So I'm really struggling to make my point with this in the sense that most of my fear was probably self-imposed. I probably had more worth than I actually believed I had, and but then the other side of it was myself exhalation, if you will, was imposed because I just so thoroughly needed it, and it saved my life. So in the end, it was it was that leaving and that staying away that kept me alive.
Well, we'll get into that the bad part about the business as we go on here. But to start off, a lot of people don't know you were a pretty decorated amateur wrestler. Could you tell us a little bit about your amateur wrestling career?
I'm glad you asked me that because my amateur wrestling career, believe it or not, um, started in high school and then transformed in the middle of high school because I was in a wrestling movie called Takedown when I was 16 years old. And it was truly one of the most spectacular times of my life. I didn't seek the movie out. They sought me out because I was an amateur wrestler and a pretty good one at the time. And so they sought me out, and I talked about this a little bit a couple of nights ago. That being in a movie is it's a powerful and especially takedown. Any of you that want to go watch it, I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. It's just called Takedown. Stars Lorenzo Lamas and Edward Herman, Kathleen Lloyd, Maureen McCormick, and then a cavalcade of other smaller scale actors. But it was a great experience, but it really, really fucked with my head. I knew after I'd done Takedown, because I was already into drama and stuff in school. I took drama all the way through high school. So I was already into that part of it. And then to get a job as a major, have this major role in a motion picture, I ended up dropping out of high school, but not before the coaches from Oklahoma State University had tracked me down and wanted to know if I was interested in coming to Oklahoma State. And I said, yeah, but I just dropped out of high school, and I had a pregnant, at the time, would end up being my wife. And so I set off to be married, and very quickly realized that the only way I was going to make out of myself was to go back to school. So I called the coach from Oklahoma State. His name was Tommy Chesborough, and I called him and I said, "What do I need to do to go back to school?" And he said, "Well, you got to go get your GED." And I said, "Okay." And I went and got it. And when I got my GED, I called him back on the phone and I said, "Hey, I got my GED. I'd like to come to Oklahoma State." And he said, "We already have all of our scholarships out." And posthumously, now I know it was his way of saying, we want you to take, we'll see how you do in JUCO. And so I went into junior college, where I was two-time All-American. Took third and was a national champion on a national championship team at North Idaho College. And then I was recruited by Iowa State University and went on to be an All-American there, and broke an NCAA record for the most falls in the national tournament. So that's my whole amateur career in a nutshell.
So what was it like wrestling in Iowa?
It's really interesting, because when I first got married, my wife's family was from Iowa. So when I was 17, which would have been the summer between my junior and senior year, I went back to Des Moines to meet my family, which all of my wife's at the time's family was from Iowa. So I went back and spent the summer in Iowa. And the interesting thing was, while I was there, my uncle-in-law contacted Dr. Harold Nichols, and I met with him. I met with Iowa State when I was 17 and just spending the summer in Iowa. And then, so I went and met him, and he said, we'd be very interested in you, but you got to get through high school. He said, "Let me introduce you to the coach from Dowling High School," which was the biggest high school in the state of Iowa. The problem was it was a Catholic high school. And the last thing they needed on a Catholic high school wrestling team was a fucking kid from the state of Utah who had a child and was married, had a child out of wedlock, and then, was married at 17 years old. So it was really awesome, though. I went and talked to him. The school's name was Dowling. It's Dowling High School in Des Moines. And anybody from Iowa knows who Dowling High School is. So I went and talked to the coach, and the coach came to me and he said, "Hey, listen, I talked to the Holy Father." And he said, "Listen, the last thing we need to have on our team is a kid from Utah, and everybody's going to start accusing our high school of recruiting, and there's no way we could deny it at that point. So they bowed out. Or I would have gone to school in Iowa even earlier. I would have gone to Dowling High School and wrestled in high school wrestling to finish my senior year out. So I was already exposed to Iowa wrestling. And Iowa wrestling, as everybody knows, is, there's Iowa and Oklahoma and, a couple of East Coast states that are, really big, Lehigh. But going to school in Iowa as a wrestler is, it's the pride of any wrestler would want to do. You go to either Iowa school, either Oklahoma school, you're going to the best school in the country for wrestling. And I'm sure there's a lot of other schools out there that would argue with me, but just on a general plane, Iowa and Oklahoma schools have always been considered sort of the creme de la creme of wrestling.
Yeah, even up here in Canada, we know that. Maybe Minnesota is a third, but definitely.
It was fucking weird to go to a duel and have 18,000 people in the stands. It was bigger than, it was as big as the basketball games, which was really, really weird.
Well, since you mentioned that, I gotta know, were the groupies better in Iowa amateur wrestling or professional wrestling?
Oh, fuck. Nothing compares to professional wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the girls of professional wrestling are a cut above. I've talked about that quite a bit today, and the women that I was associated with, that I ever met in the wrestling business, are such incredible. We're such incredible people. I would have nothing negative to say about them. They were all just incredibly giving and loving, and just for whatever reason, just really liked wrestlers. And so I was always so fortunate with the people that I hung out with, and that certainly includes the women that were in my life in that time too.
Now, from what I've read online, I understand you started working on the WWE ring crew somehow, and were putting up the cage at WrestleMania 2 in LA when you kind of got your foot in the door in the business.
That's right. Yeah, it's such a weird story. It's almost unbelievable. When I graduated from Iowa State, because when I finally went back to school and decided what I was going to do, from the day I started in school, I started working towards a degree in television and film. And so that's what I did. So every place I went to be in television and film because of the fact I wanted to, I got thrown into it when I was 17 or 16. Now I wanted to go do it because, I was that kid on the movie set too that was fucking going, hey, what are you doing there? What does that thing do? Why are you putting that light over there? And how come you've got that big thing? And so I was that curious kid. Everybody else at lunch would run off, or after when they'd call cut, and run off and, do their own thing. I would sit on the movie set and ask questions of the director of photography and, the director. And they got to the point after a while, it was like, Max, we're trying to make a goddamn movie. Shut up, and but I'm kidding, but they were incredibly generous with me. So when I graduated from Iowa State, I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to come home and talk to the guy who was the director of photography of the movie I was in, and see if he had any connections he could spare me to go to LA to seek my fame and fortune. Well, I did. And he didn't have anybody that would help me. He wanted me to do it on my own. I don't think he'd have given me names if he had them, but I know he had them, but he wanted me to find my own way. And the last thing he said to me was, you might get to LA and find that your plans will change. He said, don't ask me what that means, but you'll see, I'm sure. And so I said, okay. Excuse me. I said, okay. I had a cousin who lived in Long Beach. I jumped in my 1969 Chevy Impala four-door, beautiful patina, and drove to LA and started pursuing a career, looking for something to get me through the door. And I couldn't find anything. And I was really kind of at the end of my rope and just really desperate to find something to do once I got there. And I couldn't. And so I was going to just sleep in the next day and think about it, maybe go boogie boarding and just, try to get my mind out and go see a new movie or something. I think Back to the Future just came out. And my cousin comes in my room on the morning I think I'm going to sleep in at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He goes, hey, cousin Max, I just won some tickets to a movie premiere in Los Angeles. It was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And so I went to the premiere. It was awesome. There was all kinds of stars there: David Lee Roth and Alice Cooper, James Brolin, the list goes on and on. And so I'm standing there and I'm thinking, I'm watching the security guard. Well, the security guard's half my size, man. I'm like, so I nudge him and I said, hey, brother, how do you get a job doing this? And he looked at me and he said, fuck, you'd have a job in 5 seconds, man. And he gave me the number, and he was right. I called the next day. They hired me on the phone and told me where to go. And my very first job in the security business was to work at a fight at the Los Angeles Palladium on Sunset Boulevard. And it was the coming out party of an Olympian named Tate. And so the Tate was billed as Tate, Tillman, and Gonzalez. And it was incredible. It was an incredible day because 3 incredible things happened to me on that day. The first thing was I was standing at the back door. They put me at the back door to guard the back door first. So I'm standing there, and I'm kind of looking out over the parking lot, and all of a sudden this woman runs right into my chest. And I turned, I looked down, and her face, it was so funny, her face was so buried in my chest. She had to back up, and she looked up at me, and it was Farrah Fawcett. So I think I still had the poster in my home that my mother and father still lived in Utah. I think the poster was still hanging up over, and because anybody from that era knows who Farrah was. Then the second thing that happened to me was then they moved me from the back door to the ringside during the fight to be the security guard around the ring. And I'm standing there, and this cameraman comes backing up to me, and he wasn't slowing down. So I'd done enough camera work by then because I worked for a commercial television station at Iowa State, one of the few, the only land-grant university in the United States that ever had a public television station, a commercial public television station. And this guy backs into me, so I stuck my hand out and brought him back really gently. And when he got to me, he turned around, he looked at me, and this guy, now think about this. This is Los Angeles, California. This guy is a photographer I'd met 2 months earlier at the national tournament because he was doing interviews for ABC television for the NCAA tournament so that when they showed it on Wide World of Sports, that he would, he was the guy that went out and got all these interviews for the wrestling cutaways, and I happened to be in one of them. And I knew the guy, and he turned around and he handed me his card and he said, "Call me if you need a job." So now I got a job. And about 5 minutes after that, this guy comes walking up to me he had his shirt on for the security company I worked for, but it was different than everybody's. And he shook my hand. He said, "Hey, Max," he said, "my name's Dave Knutson." He said, "I know all about you from my guys, and they told me you're from Utah." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm from Utah too." And I'm like, now how can this day get any weirder? And he goes, "I need you to come with me. There's somebody I want you to meet." And I said, "Okay." And he was the owner of the company. So he takes me over to this back sort of patio, not a patio, but like a raised red carpet area that had a brass fence all the way around it. And you had to be, it was like a patio or a pavilion where the special guests were. And he took me back there, and he introduced me to Red Bastien. And then the rest they say, as they say, is history. Red Bastien, for anybody who knows and remembers, Red trained Sting. He trained Ultimate Warrior. He trained Angel of Death. He trained a whole bunch of other people, and that was his first count. And then in his second count, there was only a couple of us, and Red trained me as well, and that's how I got in the WWF in the beginning. What's really funny about that is I had a couple opportunities. One night, Red used to tell me all the time, "Make sure you bring your wrestling gear with you anytime that you come to build the ring. So make sure you always have your wrestling gear with you." And I said, "Okay." So it was one night, he comes and says to me, he says, "Do you got your gear?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Go get it on." And I said, "Okay." So I go put my gear on. I go back out. Here's Jay Strongbow, and he's got a big dude, kind of built like Adam Bomb, about 6 foot, about the same. I mean, almost the same size as Adam Bomb, looked just like him. And Jay Strongbow was with this guy, and he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Max, would you wrestle this guy?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we just want to see what he knows. So would you just get in the ring and roll around with him?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And as I walked around to get a towel, and he was kind of like putting his shoes on or whatever, he had tennis shoes instead of any kind of boot. Jay Strongbow comes around the table and he says, "Stretch that cocksucker. When you go out there, you just stretch that motherfucker. Remember, he doesn't know how to tie your fucking shoes." And I said, "Okay." And so I got in the ring and tied up with the guy. And the guy whispers into my ear, he goes, "Please take care of me. I don't know a fucking thing about wrestling." And that provoked me into a very unfriendly mood. And so I just took him down and stretched the shit out of him. And when I got done, I got out of the ring, and Jay Strongbow and Red were standing there. They asked me a whole bunch of questions about him. And finally, Jay Strongbow looks at Red and says, "Red, we want him right now. We want him in the WWF right now." And Red says, "He's not ready. He's not ready, Jay. You can't take him." And and besides that, he's going to Japan. And the rest is history. So I ended up building the ring for the WWF all over the West Coast for Red. That was my break-in. That was my green boy days. I'd build the ring for the guys on the West Coast, and I'd carry their jackets back. And then WrestleMania 2 came around, and I got to meet Andre, because Andre and Red were really good friends. And then Pat Patterson Red asked me if he thought I could build a cage. And I said, yeah. And Pat Patterson was the guy that was pushing. And Pat Patterson came up to me at a press conference for Andre the Giant. He says, "You think you can put that cage up in 2 minutes?" And I said, "If that's what you need, yeah." And he goes, "Well, I need it, and I don't think you can do it." And I said, "Well, let me see." So he gave me the money and the guys to practice, and we got all practiced. And the way I figured out how to do it was I used motorcycle straps to hold the cage together, and as a result of that, we could put it up in under a minute. So the night of WrestleMania 2, when we built the cage, it was amazing. It went up so fast that they weren't prepared. And Pat Patterson was so excited, he gave me and my nephew $1,000 bonus. So that's how I got started in the wrestling business.
Now, that would have been the very first time they used the blue cage, right?
Yeah, the big steel square with the big squares. And
Yeah.
everybody loved that fucking cage because it was so easy to work in. You know, I mean, you could do some crazy shit on it because it was so stable. I think most of the boys would agree that going to the fucking chain link was not the didn't make cage matches more conducive to, you know, elaborateness. It you had to take a different approach with that kind of a cage. And the blue cage was so great because you could be so dramatic with it. You know, you could make that slow ascension up to the top of it. You know, and so yeah, no, you're. I think it was. I really do. And then we had to haul it after the WrestleMania 2. Then we had to go all over the West Coast with the Bulldogs and Beefcake and Valentine, because they did a big run all over the West Coast after that with the cage. So we had to take the cage and build it all over the Western United States.
Now, you mentioned you had the opportunity to train with New Japan, and it says online that you trained alongside Chris Benoit. How was that experience?
Um, Training when it if you read it as training, um, that forgive me, I don't mean this in a negative or assholish way at all. It diminishes a little bit what really happened. And what really happened was Chris Benoit and I met in Los Angeles in August, and we went to live in Japan for a year and a half. We lived at the dojo in Setagaya-ku for a year and a half. He was my roommate, and it's funny. Sonny was there yesterday, and he reminded me they set forth to break us. You know, they wanted us to fucking quit, and neither one of us did. It was amazing. I mean, I would be lying if I said anything but that it was truly one of the most spectacular times in my life. I mean, how could you how could you have any better of a way to train than and to learn the business and to sit ringside like this and watch some of the greatest wrestlers of all times just do crazy shit. I was so lucky, and then on top of that, as hard and as sad as I am about the way Chris ended his life, I also can't erase the memories I have of him, which are wonderful, loving. I mean, he was just a great guy, and it's so fucked up. But he had a disease and a very bad one, and they can't diagnose it today even. So I don't know what's going to happen with that if it ever happens again. But Chris had there's no such thing as a good excuse. I'm not going to, that would be fucking ridiculous. But at least there was some causation, some correlation between the fact he had CTE so bad and what the outcome of his life was. So, New Japan and getting to know Chris Benoit and the time I spent there, it was spectacular. I was very, 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 very lucky.
Now, I would imagine your time in the UWF would have been a little bit different.
So UWF as in New Japan UWF?
Was it New Japan that you were in, or was it Herb Abrams? Maybe you could clear that up for us.
I was in the New Japan dojo. I worked for Antonio Inoki.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so Chris and I were only the second and the third guys to live in the dojo. The first one was Bad News Brown, or Bad News Allen, excuse me. And then Chris and I went there, and we went through. Brian Adams came to be a part of it almost at the end. Um, Brian was in a different situation though altogether because he had a girlfriend in Tokyo. He'd been in the service and on the Air Force Base in Fusa in Tokyo, and so he had a place to stay and live in Tokyo. And then after that, Too Cold Scorpio followed. And then I heard nobody again until a few years ago, and they started doing it again. But like I said, I was very privileged, very lucky to have been a part of that.
Now, what were your thoughts on Too Cold Scorpio? I know you must have come across him. We've had him on this channel a lot.
Oh, I love Cole, man. He's just he's just a spectacular human being. You know, I couldn't say enough good things about him.
So you went to Continental Wrestling Federation at some point. I guess that was for the Jarretts. How was
Yeah,
that?
they weren't calling it the Continental. It was CWA, I think. Yeah, I went there right after I left Japan. That's where I went there. I went there in the fall of '87, I believe, summer to the fall of '87. It may have been a little earlier than that. So yeah, I was there as well. Um, it was that was a good time too. That's where I really learned the American style of business the best. You know, you that's where you could still go on the road. You wasn't making any money. Uh, it's they're just. I still have my pay. That's like the only job I ever still have a pay stub from, is because it was so it was so fucked up. There was no money. I made like $225 a week, make driving 3,000 miles, but just had the time of my life. I mean, some of my greatest, in fact, most of my great memories from the wrestling business are from the CWA.
Now, are those inside the ring or outside the ring memories?
Both.
Could you give us an example of one of the outside of the ring ones?
Um, Probably my favorite outside the ring one is this time I'm gonna tell the whole fucking story the right way. So this one night we had a after television in Memphis on Saturday. We had a match in Batesville, Mississippi, and it was Lawler, Calhoun, and a crew of baby faces, and then myself, brother Ernest Angel, Terry Adonis, and we were gonna go. We were following up, something we'd done on TV, an angle we'd done on TV. And I was just talking to Lawler about this today. He doesn't remember it, but it was pretty funny. When we got there, it was packed, and there hadn't been that many towns that still sold out, and had was doing great business. So to see a house that was full was amazing. It was because Lawler and Calhoun were there. So we go to Batesville, and Brother Ernest he was my manager. He was the craziest fucker you ever met in your life. He was nuts. So we go to Batesville, and we started into the match with Lawler, and Lawler had given us the cue that we were going to throw him out, and then he was going to climb back in the ring. And as he was climbing back in the ring, Terry Adonis was the outside. I was going to draw Calhoun away, and fucking Adonis was going to smack Lawler with this fucking chair. And Terry was good at using chairs, man, really good. And Lawler would lay his back out wide open for you, so it was easy to get good crack on it, right? And the fucking place, it just, if I said to you it was Mississippi on a fucking hot August night, it was like a Foreign Legion Hall or some fucking thing. And we were all just sweating. You couldn't get your clothes on without sweating. And so we get into the match. I throw Lawler out of the ring. Everything goes exactly as planned. Got Calhoun's back to Lawler, and I hear this fucking crack. And all of a sudden, the crowd, it's funny because when that happens, it's not like a boo when what I'm about to tell you happens. You can just feel the energy switch, and all of a sudden, the crowd's trying to kill us all. I know that you're going, what, Max, why would you laugh at being some people trying to kill you? And it was because it was like a fucking Benny Hill scene. We were trying to get out of the fucking building. We had cops trying to, they were escorting us out, and they're pushing people away and smacking people with billy clubs so we could get out. So we get in the car, and we start to drive, and Ernest says he has a young man that he's dating in Oxford. And he says, Max, could we go to Oxford? I need to go see my boy. And I said, you know what? Fine. He goes, you'll have a great time. You're going to be fucking famous there. He goes, because you're a wrestler and everybody at Ole Miss watches wrestling. I said, great. So we go and we get there, and sure as shit, man, we're not there 2 minutes. They're having a party. They're having a big frat sorority party at this place we went to. And I go in, and it is just fucking packed with young women, young men, and they all know me, all of them. And so I start partying with them. Ernest took off with his friend. And right after they took off, they come back, and they said to me, Max, hey, he pulls me aside, and he goes, Max, do you want to do some ecstasy? And I said, I've never done it before, but yeah, sure. And so he gives me the ecstasy, and I take it. And now the party turns into really a lot more fun. And then I'm just standing there. I just started laughing with these fucking people, and it just took off from there. And I was just having all this fun. And Ernest comes up and he goes, Max, I got to go. I'm tired. Let's go. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to go. I'm going to get laid, and I'm not leaving. And he's going, no, we got to go because I got to get some sleep. And I'm like, okay, fucker. So you come here and get laid, and I can't. Okay, I see how it is. And we laughed, and we left. So we're driving back to Memphis. Now, Brother Ernest could only stay in the finest accommodations. And so he was staying at a Holiday Inn off of Beale Street in downtown Memphis. So we pull up to this hotel, and Ernest is great. He's one of these guys that he was a very metrosexual, homosexual, even by then standards. And he would only go to the bathroom even, like if you're driving down the road and he needed to go to the bathroom, it had to be a Holiday Inn or he wouldn't go to the bathroom. And if he went into the Holiday Inn and the public restroom was being occupied by somebody else, he would go rent a room to go to the bathroom. So he only stayed at Holiday Inns. So we go back, and we we find the Holiday Inn, and he takes the bag. He goes, takes one bag in. He says, Max, will you grab the other bag? Because he's tripping balls on the ecstasy. And I'd never done it before, so I was having a blast tripping balls too. And I walked him in, put his bag at the desk, and walked back out to get another bag. And here stands a security guard. And he's with this young lady, and she's got her head in her hands crying. And I found it curious. So I walked over to her and I said, why is she crying? And the guy says, because there's a guy that stole her purse and she had all her money in it and she can't get it back. Well, I said, do you know where he is? And he said, yeah, he's right over there in the bushes. I said, why the fuck didn't you go get him? He's like, well, so I said, I'll do it. So I go over to the fucking bushes and I say that I lean down. I can see the fucking purse and I can see it. He's just sitting there now. He's not going through it. And I said, hey, fucker, did you just steal this lady's purse? Why don't you come out and give it back to her and let's just be done with it? And all of a sudden, like a deer in the sagebrush, this guy just fucking jumps out and starts fucking running as fast as he can. And I start chasing him. This is in downtown Memphis, Tennessee. I'm chasing him through the fucking streets. And he gets away from me. I can't see where he's going. It's dark, and he gets away from me. And he gets behind his house. And anyway, he comes out from behind the house. The cops are coming around. I start chasing him. The cops missed him, didn't see him. I'm chasing him, and I just about got my hand on him. I'm just about ready to grab the fucking guy, and my sheet comes untied. Oh, I was so fucking mad. Oh, and Ernest, I said, Ernest, watch him. Look where he goes so I can tie my shoe and I can go kick his ass. And Ernest couldn't fucking keep a track of him either because we were both just too fucking high on ecstasy to be able to pay attention for that long. So finally, I get my shoe tied and I'm walking down the road, and we literally just went straight around the block from the hotel. And we walked down this alley, and this alley is just pitch black, but we can see the hotel is right straight in front of us. But as I'm walking, something captures my attention off to the left. And I look over there and I walk over, and there's a staircase that's one of those submerged ones that come out of a basement. Well, this stupid fucker had tried to get in that door, and when he did, he left the door ajar about that far, and the light was on inside. And so when I went by it, my eye caught it to the side, and I yelled over the staircase, and I said, "Look, you might as well just come up and get your ass kicking, because I'm going to fucking whoop your ass as soon as you get up here." You know, it's funny. I didn't even think about a knife or a gun or any of that shit. I just was so fucking wound up. I didn't care. And this guy came up out of this fucking stairwell screaming and hollering. And right when he fucking did, he took a big swing at me. And I just reached up and caught his arm in a painkiller, an arm bar, and put him right on the ground. Fucking, he led with his head to a gravel road, and he had gravel pellets all in his fucking forehead and shit. And he's screaming, and I fucking ripped on that arm. And I said to him, "You motherfucker, you're going to apologize to everybody I can think of." And I made him apologize to her. And she comes over and she's like, now she feels bad for him because I'm whooping his ass, right? And about that time, the cops show up. And they tap me on the shoulder and they say, "Get off of him." I'm thinking, wow, are they going to fucking arrest me? And so the cop goes, "Go sit in my car for a minute." And he walks me over and puts me in his car. Fucking my tank top's ripped and I'm fucking sweating and just, God damn it, I'm wound up. Plus I'm high on fucking ecstasy. And pretty soon I see them get this guy up and put him in an ambulance and take him away. The cop comes over and gets in the car with me, and he looks over at me and he says, "Mr. Payne, we got a bit of a problem." And I said, "Yeah, I guess we do." He goes, "Well, really, it's your problem." And I said, "Really? What's that?" He goes, "If I tell the newspapers what just happened here, you're not going to be healed tomorrow morning. And you need to tell me right now if that's what you want to do, because personally, I think we should call the papers and have them come down here and fucking tell the world about you catching this stupid fucking mugger. And I said, I respect my business enough that you better not do that. And so when I went to the locker room the next day, of course, Lawler, you can't do anything in Memphis that Lawler won't hear about it before you hear about it. And Lawler had already gotten a call from like the one of the cops. I talked to him about it today. He didn't remember this part of it, but it's so funny because the cops called him and one of his cop buddies said, "Hey, you're never going to believe what happened." So he already knew about the mugging when I got to the fucking dressing room the next day. And I got a standing O for that one in the dressing room that day. That was pretty fucking amazing. But I always thought, just to finish the story, no, you can stay where you were, brother. I always thought to myself, that motherfucker went to the jail, right? And he woke up the next morning, and like I told you, he went to the hospital, and I saw him once I let him off the ground. His head had, like the gravel pellets had pushed into his forehead. And I'm really sure he woke up the next morning going, "What fucking happened to me last night? I wasn't expecting that. Out of all the fucking guys that would have to help her, why did it have to be a fucking wrestler, for Christ's sakes?" So that's probably my best Memphis story.
Sounds like it was quite an adventure.
Oh my God, it was incredible.
Now, I understand Bill Watts brought you into WCW. People seem to either like Bill or hate him. How was your experience with him?
Well, first of all, I would be remiss in not giving credit where credit's due. Bill did give me my job, so he was never anything but good to me. But having said that, by the same token, things would have probably gone quite a bit differently for me had they recognized from the get-go what they had and been willing to do something with me that they ended up not doing. And so I didn't really see Bill that much. I mean, he gave me my contract, which was very generous, and he just missed his opportunity to make money with me, and I was always sad about that.
A lot of the fans want to know, was there heat between you and Van Hammer since you both had the guitar gimmick? He, of course, was a terrible wrestler, but I guess because of his look, they kept him around forever.
So the answer to that is absolutely not. Van and I ended up being such incredible friends. And as a matter of fact, he gave me the guitar he used to come to the ring with. He dropped it off his motorcycle and broke it. So he gave it to me. And I fixed it and gave it to my oldest son. And he still has the guitar to this day. So that I always liked Van. I always thought, I went to England with him, and he took me to his favorite fish and chips house, and I think he got me some hash or some pot while I was there, so I had something to smoke. And he was just a sweetheart to me. I would never say anything bad about Van. Van kind of got a bad rap, and I have to say, him giving his guitar to me was him saying in his own way, "Hey, you're the fucking real deal. Here, take this." And he was generous as fuck.
That's true, because I don't really. Did he play his own guitar, actually?
No.
Okay.
He couldn't play a note.
Okay. Have you kept in contact with him at all? Because I know he had some issues over the past few years, but hopefully he's turned himself around.
I didn't. I know. I without even asking what those issues are, I think I probably know them, because he made it pretty clear what his demons were to me. And like I said, I just liked Van. He was just he was just good to me, you know. I mean, hey, if I never really saw him be anything but good to anybody. It was everybody else that was hard on him because he was green and didn't think he deserved it. And so they were going to be justice, jury, and executioners.
Yeah, and there's a lot of jealousy in wrestling, and people probably didn't help him either, I imagine.
Oh, fuck no. Not only did they not help him, they fucking tried to bury him all the time. Everything they did was, you know, try to bury him or fucking make him look stupid or, you know, it was ridiculous.
You're probably best remembered from WCW with tag teaming with Cactus Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share some memories about that?
Yeah, you know, that was a great time of my life in the business. And I was only ever sad was that it ended at all. You know, I didn't want it to end. I didn't want to not be mixed partner. That was, I found out years later that was mixed choice. And um, we had so much fun together. I just love Mick. And I know, I think now he feels quite a bit different about me. Um, it was great. I mean, I'll tell you one story. Mick actually used this in an interview one time, but I didn't really smash his head into the dashboard. That was the only difference. Um, we were driving through the country one day, and he had this old, fucked up, beat up um, Dodge. I don't remember, some Dodge or Chrysler Sebring or something convertible, and it was just beat to shit, but it had a pretty good stereo in it. And so we were driving down the road, and I asked Mick. I said, "Hey Mick, have you ever heard Tori Amos?" And he said, "No, I never have, Max." And I said, "Well, check this out." And Tori Amos has this little EP out called Crucify, and it's got her version of "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on it by Nirvana, and it's just a piano and her singing this song. And I have to tell you, it's one of the greatest songs. I love it. If you haven't ever heard it, wrestling fans, go out and listen to it. It's a very incredible version of "Smells Like Teen Spirit." And so we start listening to it. And I'm just, you know, just kind of doing my thing. And I look over at Mick, and fucking, he is crying. Crocodile tears are rolling down his face. And I looked at it, I said, "Well, I guess that means you like it." I don't know. And so Mick told the exact same story, but for a promo we did once. And then he added that then Max did the only thing that he could have done, being my friend at that exact moment. He reached up, tapped me on the back of my head, and then he smashed my face into the dashboard. I didn't do that.
Okay, well, if I ever interview him, I'll ask him about that.
Well, he'll tell you. He'd gladly tell you that story.
Now, I guess there was some sort of incident with you and Brian Knobbs during a tag team match that didn't go too well. Could you tell us what happened there?
You know, I can't tell you how many wrestlers have said this, and I know this for a fact, that the Nasty Boys were the stiffest fuckers on the planet, and their work looked like shit. That was always the hard part about it. And that was pretty fucking true, man. They hurt the fuck out of me on several occasions. I mean, really bad. They knocked me out cold one time in the ring. I couldn't fucking move. And they used to come in and plan all the matches and never ask my opinion, never talk to me about how things were going to go or what I wanted to do or, you know, any of that. So one night I said to them, they came in and started telling me what the fuck I was going to do. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to do what I want to do tonight. It's my turn to get my shit in. And if you don't want to go with me, well, then I guess you're going to have to fucking find out what the ramifications of not letting me do what I want to do. And Brian blamed me for that. Brian hurt himself because he tried to dictate. This is a classic example. He tried to dictate how the fucking throw was going to go. And instead of him trusting me, and he couldn't trust anybody because he'd hurt so many people that he couldn't trust anybody because they would hurt him back. And I should have been one of those people that said no a long time earlier, and I didn't. And I finally said, no, you're not going to do that. And I went to throw him. And once again, he decided he was going to run the show. And as a result of that, instead of following me and going over with me the way I was trying to throw him, he tried to jump straight over the top of me. And he did it. If he would have just trusted me to throw him, he wouldn't have got hurt. And the other part was, if you're in the middle of a throw to throw somebody, you can't change that, So he stood in a dressing room on several occasions and blamed me. And I said, yeah, because I was the one that jumped straight over and didn't follow the throw. So that's where that's kind of where it all came from. And that's where it manifested itself. And they got their shit in the end anyway. At the match that we did in Chicago, they fucking hardwayed both Mick and I on several occasions. So it was just more of the same from them. That doesn't mean the matches weren't exciting. And the nice thing about it is, from a fan standpoint of view, that was as close to shoot wrestling as you can get.
Yeah, people love those matches, and they still talk about them today.
Yeah, it was fun.
There's a lot of people on here. I think we're going to have you back for a part 2 because we only are scratching the surface here. But one of the questions that's come up a lot is, what's the status of those WWE behind the scenes videos that you put out a trailer for, that a documentary was coming, and then nothing ever happened?
The reason nothing ever happened is because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared to. At the time, I don't think it was. I don't think it was time for me to do that then. I think it's probably a little safer to let it go now, because nobody hasn't seen. Some of the stuff. I will tell you. It has some of the most. It has shit. There's never been a movie like it. I'm very proud of it. We'll just have to see what happens with it, but it's truly behind the scene. It's truly a behind the scenes movie. And the sad part about the movie is half the people in it are dead. I mean, I've spent all day crying today, finding out friends I didn't know were dead or have passed. And so it would mean a lot to the wrestling business to see that movie. So I'm still wrestling with that. I'll tell you, here's where I'm at on that. That's important to me. But I'm going to let that wait, because I have a couple other projects that need attention first. I think anyway. And we're going to start with those, and those should give you some serious shit to talk about.
Now, when you were back there in WWE, did the Clique get along with you? Because around that time, they had a lot of power backstage.
It's funny you would say that, because there is a couple of scenes in the movie where I absolutely discuss that extensively. I mean, that was part of what was happening with me in that movie. And the funny part about this, see, nobody knows this, is I made that movie and I had already been fired. I knew I was done at the end of that tour. And I literally left the WWF. When you finally see that movie, I literally left the WWF with fans chanting in Germany. It was actually Switzerland, in Geneva, Switzerland. I walked out of the ring, and my last match for the WWF was with the crowd chanting "Do it again." Zugaben. It's the Germans are amazing when the Europeans, when they start chanting, this is a German phrase, but when they start chanting Zugaben, Zugaben means do it again, do it again, do it again. That's their way of calling for a encore. So I went back for an encore and played the second song I'd prepared, and then I walked out of the ring and never went back.
Did you get along with the Undertaker behind the scenes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Mark's a class act. That's all there is to it.
How was working with Bob Backlund?
You know, it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time doing that. But like I said, by the end of my WWF run, I was through. Put a fork in me. I was fucked up and I was just done. I'd had all I could take. I couldn't take it no more. So it wouldn't have mattered who it was. I was just too frustrated at the time, and I was ready to go home.
I guess Sunny would have been in her prime during the days of your video footage. Is there some stuff on her in that?
I don't think they were with me. I don't think they were with us on that one.
There's been a bunch of people that have wanted to know about your relationship with Eric Bischoff.
You know, Eric Bischoff.
You know what? That's where it ends. That's where it ends, Hannibal. You asked the wrong question. And you don't have to worry about what's on that video. You want to know why? Because the captain says you need to worry about this man. This is the first interview he's done with anyone in a 20-something year period. And your silly Canadian ass is lucky to have him on your feed.
Well, you better get us a part two. You better get us a part two. The fans want it.
Oh, really? You know what I want? Good night.
And the documentary footage for